It's always disturbingly quiet, like right just before we get started.
Who's that? Is that you?
No, I don't know whose that is. It's been empty for a little while here. So. Hey, welcome. All right, guys, we're going to kick things off here. It is 6 o'clock here in Ubud, Bali. Tuesday night, time for Bitcoin Filter. It's Tuesday, March 31st, 2015. We've got a really good program set up for you tonight. Yeah, we're going to, as usual, we're going to talk about the price a little bit. Kind of a boring topic, but we'll still cover it like we always do. Then we're going to go through the news of the day. Some exciting news happened today in the Bitcoin world. More soap opera stuff. It's not dull. I think it'd be interesting to talk about that big headline today. And we're going to talk about how to store viruses and kitty porn on the blockchain. So a little bit of an informative structure tonight.
Yeah, we need more how-tos.
And of course, the topic for tonight is China. More importantly, the de-dollarization of the world and a restructuring of the global financial system, global monetary system. It's a big deal. It's something that only happens every 50 or 75 years, and it's probably going to happen in our lifetime. And while China has made some really strong moves in the last few weeks, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about that. So we're going to go over that once we get through the news of the day. So with that, we'll kick it off. Let me share my screen here so people don't have to look at my ugly mug anymore tonight. All right, now everybody should be able to see my screen. For those of you who are new, the way this little get-together works is we throughout the week, we gather virtually at this Facebook group called Bitcoins in Bali. I encourage you to take a look and maybe join. And people who are in the group will post stories throughout the week. And we'll talk about it online. But every Tuesday night, we get together to talk about the Bitcoin news of the day. Come on a sec here. We get together at Ubud, right here in lovely downtown Ubud, Bali, rain or shine. We get together here at the Ubud co-working space. They're nice enough to provide the space for us. And if you find yourself in Bali on a Tuesday, please come join us in person at Ubud. You can find them at ubud.org, and there's a map there. Come and participate in person if you can. We also have a conversation going on Twitter. If you look at the hashtag Bitcoins in Bali, if you have any questions or anything comes to mind as a result of what we've talked about tonight, you can ask your question on Twitter, and we'll get to it as soon as you can. Also, if you have any news items or things you want to discuss via Twitter, just post it with the hashtag Bitcoins in Bali, and we can talk about things there as well. All right, what are we trying to do here in Bali? You can see here, this is a map of all of the places around the world that accept Bitcoin. Down here in Bali, we've got about 35 merchants. Not a whole lot of merchants, but actually you can kind of live your life on Bitcoin here if you so choose. You can hire a taxi driver or go to a restaurant. You can stay in a 5-star hotel. You can even go mountain biking on Bitcoin here in Bali. So we're working on it. As a community, we try and find, well, we try and get people to understand what Bitcoin is, get them to use it, kind of sign up merchants to use it. And slowly but surely, we're making some headway. We've got 35 merchants here in Bali. By comparison, Singapore's only got 41. They're the tech hub, or I'm sorry, the financial hub, and they're only beating us by 6 merchants. So hopefully we can surpass them. Incidentally, at coinmap.org, they'll color your dot red if you have 100 merchants. So we're trying to reach 100 merchants before the heavy season in July and August. I want to be a Bitcoin-friendly destination by that time. It's already friendly here, but we're working on making that even better. You can follow some of our efforts at the bitislands.com project. It's a social experiment where we document the merchants that accept Bitcoins here in Bali, and that's really where the effort is focused. All right. So speaking of Bitcoin, let's take a look at the Bitcoin price. We're in Indonesia. So let's look at the Indonesian price at bitcoin.co.id, the Indonesian Bitcoin exchange. We are at about 3.2 million rupiah for one Bitcoin. So if you've got 3.2 million rupiah laying around, if you're a rupiah millionaire, you can buy some Bitcoin. But let's take a look at the denomination that most people think of Bitcoin in. That's the US dollar. $245 for one Bitcoin. We've been hovering right around 250. In fact, we go right up to 250 and then something happens. So obviously somebody's rigging the market and creating a wall, or it could be a psychological barrier, 250. In any case, looks like it just fell $5. This could be due to the fact that we're meeting here in Ubud, because we always illuminate so much about what's going on with Bitcoin, that it has a bearing on the worldwide market. Undoubtedly, this is no coincidence that this has happened here, but we'll press on. We're undaunted. Okay, anyone remember what this number is? You're not gonna fall for it. All right, I'm gonna refresh the screen. Let's see here. This, now that I've refreshed the screen, is the total number of Bitcoins in existence. Unlike other monies around the world, we know at all times exactly how many Bitcoins exist. Why is this important? Because the value of money is based on supply and demand. If you've got more supply, then the things that it's measured by are worth less. And given that governments around the world are printing money to beat the band, well, when they print money, it means the money in your pocket is worth less. It buys less. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you are, it's fortunate for governments, I guess, we never know what the total supply of, for example, US dollars are, or European euro. We have a little bit of an idea. The Fed will publish numbers about the M1 money supply, which is the coins and paper notes that are in existence, also the numbers in people's bank accounts. But due to fractional reserve banking, that's only a small portion of the actual money that exists in the world. So Bitcoin is superior to other monies in that regard, because it's transparent. We know exactly how many Bitcoins exist at all time. Because we know that, we can do a little quick calculation to find the market cap. What is the total value of all Bitcoins in existence? I think the price we saw was $245, right? Mm-hmm. So $245 times the total number of Bitcoins in existence, we're at about 3.4 billion US dollars. All coins in existence right now today are worth about 3. Anyone have?
Trillion rupiah? Is that?
I don't know. Don't make me do more math. I'm not that good at it. Okay. So, any questions about that? Any questions about how that's calculated, or why Bitcoin is different in that regard? It's a very cool thing. Okay. Moving on. The news of the day. Nobody posted this in the group, but it was such a big deal. I had to throw it up here. 2 former federal agents charged with stealing Bitcoin during the Silk Road probe.
Whoa.
This is so good. You couldn't write it. I mean, there's so many things about Bitcoin that you just couldn't make it up. It's the truth is better than fiction. And here we had a couple of, I don't know what these guys were thinking, but they were undercover agents, I think in Baltimore or Washington, somewhere, and they were going to infiltrate the the Silk Road. Are you guys familiar with the Silk Road, the drug marketplace that the FBI infiltrated and seized the servers more than a year ago now? Anyway, they found that these guys who were undercover agents, they were actually corresponding with Dread Pirate Roberts, the guy who started the Silk Road, you know, trying to become administrators, trying to interact with him in order to learn his whereabouts or who he was, or they were part of the investigation, but they were undercover. And it turns out they were double agents because, well, for one thing, they created alias accounts and started trading in Bitcoin. And they actually approached the Dread Pirate Roberts and offered to sell him information about the investigation of Silk Road. So
This is a movie.
I think I love it. I mean, I just think this is the kind of, well, this is the kind of thing that you find with Bitcoin. This is the kind of thing that just makes it endlessly interesting, I think, to just pay attention to the Bitcoin world. And you can read about it yourself. I think it's really good. They stole upwards of $800,000, I think, worth of Bitcoin. Not stole, but somehow diverted away into their own accounts or what have you. But they were caught. Incidentally, this evidence was sequestered during the trial of Ross Ulbricht, the Dread Pirate Roberts, Ross Ulbricht, who they eventually caught and put on trial. This evidence for these guys was suppressed. He was found guilty. Kind of a tragic story. Well, I don't know how tragic it is. It's interesting. And I thought that he would have a better shot taking his case to trial. But in any case, a little side note on this is this evidence was not allowed in this trial, and some people are quite outraged at that. So I encourage you to take a look.
It's interesting though that they're actually being charged. You know, that's already something. I wouldn't even expect that they go that far.
Yeah, it is interesting. You know, there is still. I think actually, you know, I get kind of down on government and the state, but you know, there's a lot of like good, sincere, and smart people that work for the government that still that are, you know, that their reason for being is sincere, and they're trying to make the world better. Lots of cops, lots of people in the FBI and the DEA. Not everybody's a part of the man trying to squash us down, and I think this is evidence of that. So yeah, I think that is cool that they caught these guys and they're bringing them to justice. So
What's that name?
that's actually Russ Ulbricht's mother, I think,
Oh.
weighing in. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about that.
Like it from Legends.
Don't quote me on that. I'm
You
not
never
sure.
know.
That's
When
true.
you're undercover, you
I
Little granny.
sorts of disguises.
Yeah, exactly.
I pulled this together at the last minute. I'm not fully up to date on this. Other big news: Kaspersky alerts users of malware and blockchain abuse. This was my little quip about malware and kiddie porn on the blockchain. Well, one thing that's interesting about Bitcoin is it's an unerasable ledger in the sky, right? So somebody can create a Bitcoin transaction and they can attach some data or some information to that transaction. Any data. Bitcoin does not care what data you put in the text box of your Bitcoin transaction. So you could actually encode whatever you want in the blockchain. It can never be erased. So what's kind of, you can use your imagination on what bad actors could do with that capability, and I don't think there's any way around it. Either you have a ledger that can never be erased, or you have the ability to write things that people find offensive to that same ledger. You can't have it both ways. Interestingly, that like it's kind of free speech on steroids. I mean, anybody can say anything on the blockchain, and it can absolutely never be erased unless the internet blows up, or the planet Earth is gone, or you know, that's why Bitcoin works, is because you can't erase anything that's there. But unfortunately, I think people have already put some pretty gnarly, nasty stuff in the blockchain, and obviously, you know, images that people will find offensive, or malware, you could actually put code or pieces of code into the blockchain and then execute it. Use that to execute code outside the blockchain. But anyway, kind of an interesting story, interesting thing to think about.
Screw up the blockchain with malware.
No, it won't. It will not screw up the blockchain. It will just screw up other things. Yeah. All right, moving on. One more story that was posted to the Bitcoins in Bali group before we move on to the main topic tonight. This is, I believe this was posted by Teddy. The solution to Wall Street's 1960s paperwork crisis could also save Bitcoin. I didn't fully read this, but it looks really intriguing. I want to take a look at it again. Did anyone read this article?
There's a similar blog post on Wall Street Journal yesterday. I don't know which came first.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you remember anything from it, or can you?
Just it was that, you know, providing electronic transaction verification in an independent ledger could solve a number of minor problems that plague current financial systems.
Right.
You know,
Well,
it's
at the
not rocket science.
right. That sounds right. And at the risk of being slightly wrong about everything that's here, because I haven't read the whole article, there is a fundamental problem when you're trying to represent things virtually. And they came across this problem with stock way back in the 60s, where companies would issue stock, and they would actually, in essence, print their own money. It wasn't money; it was stock certificates. And if you bought 100 shares of Ford, somebody would show up with a milk crate full of paper. It was the stock certificates for Ford Motor Company or whatever other stock that you were buying. And that was the genuine article. If you lost that, I mean, I don't know what kind of mechanisms they had if those were lost or counterfeited. I think they did have some problems with people trading counterfeited stock certificates. You have the same problem that you have with money. Obviously, the blockchain is an answer to that problem. In fact, we had that problem even though we had electronic banking and electronic ledgers. We still had the same problem because people and institutions, and legally, I might add, do fractional reserve banking with everything that is not real, including stock certificates. We've talked about this in these meetings in the past, that fractional reserve banking happens with all bank accounts, but also with stocks. In fact, if you buy stock on E-Trade, chances are that some other entity has legal possession of that stock before you. So if something goes wrong and that stock is being used as collateral in some other financial instrument, and somebody goes bust or somebody needs that collateral, and you have some sort of downstream rights to that, but not priority rights, then you could be SOL. That is happening. In fact, there are companies out there that are trying to solve this problem. Essentially, this is what Bitcoin and blockchains are. It's reality in the digital world. It's true reality in the digital world, so that you can't duplicate things like stock ownership. And I believe that's what this article is about. It's about they're going back and seeing, like, remembering the problems from Wall Street and stock certificate issuance, and then fast forward to the future where there's fractional reserve situations with stock certificates today, and well, we can do better because we have blockchain. Looks really interesting. Take a look. Oh, look at that guy. That looks like a nightmare, doesn't it? He should keep his desk cleaner. All right, moving on.
Here's in here somewhere. It says.
All right, on to the main event. We're going to China, well, we've talked about China a lot in these meetings, right? You put up an animated graphic of people in China buying Bitcoin. It just looks like an endless flow of Bitcoins to China. It looks like Bitcoin is just like churning big Bitcoin machine and buying up all the Bitcoins in existence. I think last time I looked, they were buying 7, 8, or 9 times more Bitcoin than the United States was buying. So they're a big player in the in the Bitcoin world, but obviously they're a big and rising power in the global economic theater. The geopolitics of money is in flux in a big way, and China is making moves. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And I'll try and bring it back to Bitcoin, but we're going to talk about politics and it's going to seem like we're kind of off the Bitcoin trail. I'll try and like bring it back home at the end. And if there's any questions about how it relates in the middle, just speak up and we'll talk about it. So the main thing that really gives us something to talk about is this Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the AIIB, which is China's essentially last ditch effort or answer to the World Bank or the IMF or the development banks that have been in power since Bretton Woods, since post-World War II global monetary. This is how the global monetary system is going to work.
BRICS as well.
Right. We've also talked about the BRICS Bank, and I'll throw that there too. It's the same idea, and it's really China becoming fed up with the status quo. Unfortunately, the United States has been kind of a impolite little kid on the playground and not letting China play with its marbles, or bullying people around or bullying other kids on the playground to not play with China, etc. China has a long history of trying to involve itself in the existing institutions, those being the IMF, the World Bank, etc. And they even want to add the IDR to, the renminbi to the SDR, which is the IMF's fiat currency. Anyone here hearing about the SDR for the first time? Oh, you know about the SDR. Okay, there's a lot of things going on here, but essentially what's going on is the United States is the steward of the dollar. The dollar is the world's global reserve currency, and we are in the process of ruining the dollar brand. So imagine like we're Louis Vuitton and we've got a bunch of leather, we sell leather handbags and everybody loves our Louis Vuitton leather handbags, and we sell them for $1,000 for a bag. And then next season we make all of our bags out of plastic, right? But everyone's like, ooh, Louis Vuitton bag, plastic is chic, and they, it takes a couple of years before people are like, man, my Louis Vuitton just doesn't seem to be holding up like it used to, and they leave. That's what's going on right now with the dollar. The dollar, we've been good stewards of the dollar since World War II, basically. Things kind of changed back in the 70s when we went off the gold standard. But we haven't printed it to beat the global economic crisis of 2008. 2008 happened, and basically we were caught with our pants down, and the central bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, does not know what to do, does not know what they're doing. They've got two policy mechanisms at their disposal. That's printing money and setting the overnight interest rates for member banks. And interest rates have been at 0 since 2008, and we've quadrupled the money supply since 2008. And, well, fast forward to China opening the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. It is a direct repudiation of the dollar, of what we've done with the dollar. They realize that the dollar no longer has integrity on international markets, so they're looking for something different, right? Now, why does opening an infrastructure bank, what does that have to do with monetary policy? They just want to invest in projects. They want to help feed the poor. They want to go improve literacy in Indonesia. These are the things that these and other organizations like it propose to do, but really there's a lot of power that goes along with it, Essentially for China, it means that they can settle their balance of accounts outside of the dollar. They can also loan money within emerging markets and then ensure that Chinese companies win those contracts to build those trains, to make those sneakers, to log the timber of a country or extract the oil, what have you. This is how the U.S. operates. They'll go into a small country and they'll loan them a bunch of money, and then they've got you. Yeah.
China's
then you're
also
the
making a new middle class. It's creating a new middle class for its products.
right.
So if the average income comes up in developing countries, then those people are the new middle class.
That's right. That's
Buy
right.
more products.
Well said, Deborah. When we first got involved with China, they were everybody had a dirt floor, right? And now they want to buy washing machines and go on vacation, and well, things are changing, and they've been selling plastic crap to North America for the last at least 20 years. And what did they get for all that plastic stuff? US dollars, right? So they've got money to invest. They're net savers, and the United States are net borrowers, and it's becoming time to pay the piper, right? This stuff is coming to a head. So what's really interesting about this AIIB is that if you watch the soap opera of it all, if you watch the drama, it's very illustrative that the United States is losing some of its influence throughout the world because the United States did not want this bank to succeed. They did not want to see this happening, and they put political pressure on basically all of our allies that the Chinese were courting to become founding members of this bank. And beginning with the UK, they've almost all decided to participate. So I've got a few other links up here. Wait, let's see here. Where am I? Oh, okay. So the first one that they were talking about was Britain. You can see that this just happened a few weeks ago. With plan to join China-led bank, Britain opens door for others. Is that the? Hold on, let me just. Yeah. So let's see. Membership by Britain, America's closest ally and the first would-be member from the group of 7 leading economies, would be a major step toward China's goal of making the bank, which President Xi Jinping inaugurated last October, a global financial institution rivaling the World Bank. Right, so this is a rival to the World Bank. Fundamentally, Washington views the Chinese venture as a deliberate challenge to those post-war institutions. Post-war, that's post-World War II. That's the last time the United States declared war, by the way. Which are led by the United States and to a lesser extent Japan. There are other development banks out of Japan, I'll show you in a minute. And the Obama administration has put pressure on allies not to participate. So this is like, you can almost, I use the analogy, it's like the playground. I mean, it really feels like it's just kids like pushing each other around, South Korea and Australia, both of which count China as their largest trading partner. There's that middle class, right? Deborah, have seriously considered membership, but have held back largely because of forceful warnings from Washington, including a specific appeal to Australia by President Obama. The United States has been unremittingly negative. So without a doubt, the U.S. sees this as a threat, but this is the New York Times, right, reporting this horse is out of the barn. You can't stop this. And a couple days later, sure enough, 3 European powers say they will join the China-led bank. Ignoring direct pleas from the Obama administration, Europe's biggest economies have declared their desire to become founding members of a new Chinese-led Asian investment bank that the United States views as a rival to the World Bank. Right? So, checkmate Obama, really. I mean, if you can't get Britain to tag along, obviously that, it just makes too much sense for them. I mean, the world is a global place. The trends are undeniable. China's on the rise. United States is, Well, you can tell they're struggling because they're starting to throw their might around. They're starting to get angry, just like anybody who you're kind of beating in an intellectual argument, they'll resort to violence. You know, the U.S. has been testing testing its ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, all of which can basically hit any point on planet Earth with nuclear weapons. So it's no coincidence that we're running those tests. It's things are becoming military. I mean, you can see us with a proxy representation in Russia, with Russia and Ukraine. Things are happening with Syria. This is all related to a grand geopolitical set of circumstances over oil and power and money.
Although it doesn't seem to play out as the way they want it to play out.
No, well, the way the U.S. wants it, yeah. Well, we've been spoiled. The United States has had their way since World War II, and that's why I thought this would be so interesting to talk about today, because it just so clearly illustrates that we don't have full control over everybody. You know, people are defecting. They're not succumbing to the pressure, and they would if they could. But it's just so obvious that it's just not in their interest, right? Something is going to happen besides the dollar, and whatever that is, China will be a key player in it, and so they don't want to be left behind, essentially. This is the New Development Bank. This is another effort related to the AIIB, but it's just the BRIC nations, this is so that Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa a little bit can do business together outside of the dollar. Same thing going on. Yeah, this is more of a regional bank, but still a undeniable reaction to the hegemony of United States-led international banks. So what are these international banks? Also, Asia, have you guys heard of the Asia Development Bank? This is actually the United States. If you look down here, it's only ever been presided over by Japan, and Japan is an ally of the United States. And this operates based on, if you want to relate it to cryptocurrencies, it's like proof of stake. Japan has the largest voting power in this organization, and China is, well, arguably number 4, right, and way down the list in terms of its stake. So you've got kind of a block of power in this, quote, Asian Development Bank, where I guess you can count Japan as Asia, but really Asia, this development bank is not acting in the best interest of Asia, the big powers in Asia. So
Japan is well known to be a proxy of.
Right. Although it looks like Japan will join the AIIB.
Meanwhile,
right. So anyway, so that's the Asia Development Bank, another player. Sorry if it's confusing, but there's a lot. So here's the World Bank, and this is the Wikipedia page for World Bank. I thought it was kind of interesting that this was formed out of Bretton Woods, 1944. This is post-World War II monetary regime. The World Bank was created in 1944 after the Bretton Woods Conference. That's where they decided on the monetary system, along with other institutions, blah, 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 like the IMF, etc. The president of the World Bank is traditionally an American. Look down here. This is the World Bank, and look at all of these presidents going back to 1946. Always United States, United States, United States. They also have, this guy was an Australian. He had to like convert to the United States. he left Australia, well, it's just obvious that that this is a U.S. organization and it furthers the U.S. interests. Now, see if have you guys heard of this book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman? Really fascinating story. Please take it with a grain of salt. I don't know about all of the validity around what this guy says, but this guy did indeed work for the government, and he does have an interest in selling his salacious story. So take a look at it with that in mind. But he makes some pretty interesting assertions in this book, and if even a fraction of what he says is true, you can see what kind of power a development bank has. In his case, it was the IMF. I'll just read for you. According to his book, Perkins' function was to convince the political and financial leadership of underdeveloped countries to accept enormous development loans from institutions like the World Bank. Saddled with debts they could not hope to pay, those countries were forced to acquiesce to political pressure from the United States on a variety of issues. Perkins argues in his book that developing nations were effectively neutralized politically, had their wealth gaps driven wider, and economies crippled in the long run. In this capacity, Perkins recounts his meetings with some prominent individuals, et cetera, right? Now, it seems to me that could happen to a certain extent. I mean, that kind of thing has gone on since people decided to stop whipping slaves. This is the next version of slavery. You indebt people, and then you give them a little prize up front, and then you have them for later on. I think this was even done in post-slavery America, because when the slaves were set free, they oftentimes were hired by the plantations where they worked because they didn't know anything else, right? And then the plantations would give them a line of credit at the canteen. Hey, come buy some candy, come buy stuff. They'd get into debt, and then they were just as enslaved as they were. Anyway, why not? Why wouldn't this happen on a global scale? It's quite possible. And the entire emerging world is up for grabs. All of the growth that can happen in countries like Indonesia and Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar. These are societies where the investment will take place, right? And companies from all over the world will vie for those resources and vie for that business. And it's through development banks that this kind of thing happens. Incidentally, on a little side note, because this guy has received a lot of criticism for his work, and he's, as far as I can tell, he's always rebutting and defending himself. But I thought this was interesting. Perkins charges that the proposed conditions for debt forgiveness, which is what we're talking about in Greece, right? We talked about Greece last week, and there's at least in some circles talking about forgiving their debt. But you can bet that there's going to be some strings attached to any debt forgiveness that takes place. And here he says, here's what the playbook is. For debt forgiveness, countries need to privatize their health, education, electricity, water, and other public services. Where do those contracts go? They go to private industry where large multinational corporations can come in and participate, really through the fine print of some sort of debt forgiveness program, right? I don't know if this is how the world works, but it's pretty damn interesting to think about. I mean, I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist. I think that there are powerful people that make shit happen. And even if it's not true, it's fun to speculate. And even if it doesn't happen to the extent that some people assert, it probably happens a little bit.
Well, if only 10% of the things are true, then it's already...
Right. I mean, people have the power to make this happen. Why wouldn't people exercise that power? I think they probably do. Okay. More information, more kind of piling on. This is from The Economist. I love when mainstream publications kind of really talk about the stuff that we're talking about here, about what's really going on when the United States says, oh, this new bank, they're not going to have the same standards as Western banks. They're going to, employ child labor or not have the same environmental, they're going to back projects that pollute the earth. I mean, and
Black calling the kettle
when-
black.
when mainstream places like The Economist, I love The Economist, by the way. I think they're really smart guys over there. Sometimes they're kind of towing the party line about things, but that's why it's so neat when they kind of call the kettle black, or they come out and things that they say things that I think, that I usually only see in kind of the fringy areas of the internet that I.
Well, it seems to be happening more and more actually.
It does. Out of necessity, just like those countries are aligned with the AIIB out of necessity. I mean, these journalistic outfits, I mean, they just can't.
The emperor doesn't have any.
Yeah, they can't stand there. They can only stand there for so long with their pants around their ankles before they're going to be like, okay, yeah, this is what's going to. All right. So take a look at these articles. They're all really good. If I pull them out here, I'll put them in the notes for the show tonight. Okay, so I wanted to make the connection with military, because if you're paying attention, there's a lot of military stuff going on around the globe, and it's really scary because when a dog's backed in a corner, it'll bite you, and the United States is getting a little. I think it's getting a little twitchy about things. There's nasty stuff going on in the Ukraine, all this stuff going on in the Middle East. I don't know. It's scary. But oh yeah, this is the graph that I wanted to show you. This is military spending. Yeah, you can see that this is spending from 2004 to 2013, and you can see that war on terror, etc. We're ramping up military spending to beat the band. Except for recently, we've been flat in terms of growth. We still way outspend everybody else. You can see the orders of magnitude difference in what we spend on defense. What's interesting is the trend. You can see that our allies are spending less and less on military. Russia, China, unmistakable trends in military spending. And this is just what we can divine. Who knows what they're really spending? I mean, it probably behooves China and Russia to obfuscate what they're really spending. This is not a fringe article from the Washington Post, and I don't think it surprises anybody. Although when you see it laid out like this, it's kind of a nail biter. You got the new kids on the block, kind of ramping things up, and at some point they're going to challenge the emperor, right? They're like, someone's going to challenge the big kid, the bully. Someone's going to try and knock his block off, right? And well, that's not fun. It's not lost on me that all of this military stuff is coinciding with all of this monetary uncertainty around the world. Things are just up in the air, and especially when the political pressure isn't working. Like if you say, hey, UK, hey, Australia, hey, South Korea, don't join this Asian investment bank, and they do anyway, that's when you're like, all right, okay, I see how it is. And you start cleaning your gun when your daughter's boyfriend comes over, and you gotta show him what's going on. You start cleaning your gun when he comes. I digress. What else? Okay, so here's more opinion pieces, basically saying 7 decades after the end of World War II, the international economic architecture crafted by the U.S. faces its biggest shakeup yet, with China establishing new channels for influence to match its ambitions. This is from Bloomberg. Chinese President, does anyone know how to say his name? Xi Jinping. Vision of achieving the same great power status enjoyed by the United States received a major boost this month when the UK, Germany, France, and Italy signed on to the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The AIIB will have authorized capital of $100 billion and starting funds of about $50 billion. So that pretty much says it all. Kind of recaps what I've been saying all evening here. Australia signals approval of China-based AIIB. Japan divided. So I don't know what their official stance is now. This was just a few days ago. maybe a little over a week ago. I don't know exactly what the status is of Japan. Oh yeah, Japan, Australia, and South Korea, all major U.S. allies, are on the notable are the notable regional absentees from the AIIB. The United States, worried about China's growing diplomatic clout, has questioned whether the AIIB will have sufficient standards of governance and environmental and social safeguards. So there's the U.S. stance. Yeah. But the opposition to the AIIB began crumbling after Britain said earlier this month that they will join the institution, maintaining it was of national interest. Yeah, so check that out. Indonesia wants to host the headquarters of the AIIB in Jakarta, so I think they're on board. And this is, I wanted to quote this. I don't have access to FT, but this is quoted from FT. Japan is likely to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank within a few months, according to the country's ambassador to Beijing, a move that would see Tokyo break ranks with Washington and leave the U.S. as the only big holdout. Masato Katera told the Financial Times he agreed with Japanese business leaders' belief that the country would sign up to the Development Bank by June. So even Japan, and I don't know, I think this is what we're going to talk about next week is Japan. Japan has been printing money for the last 10 years, and a lot of people think that, well, we can see what our future is by just looking at Japan. So I was thinking about maybe taking a look at that next week. I'm not sure yet. But anyway, for Japan to get behind this AIIB is just really the kind of the last straw. So China emerged as winner of the over the U.S. in creation of Asian Infrastructure Bank. So it's kind of like, at least right now, it looks like they're winning the war. Now, before we throw up our hands and start learning Chinese, right? China is not, well, China has its problems too. You know, they've got over 1.5 billion people, and they've got a whole mountain of cash, and they don't know what to do with it. You know, this is actually what led to the housing bubble, is too much money, not enough places to invest it, not enough good places to invest it, right?
Depends what you define as good.
Well, what happens with banks is they want to loan it on collateral, right? And who's better collateral than a hardworking American with a mortgage for 30 years, right? I'll take that bet. That guy's going to pay me back, right? So, you know, right, exactly. We learned the hard way. We learned the hard way that when you have those perverted incentives, right? Hey, you need a loan. Hey, you need a loan. Oh, don't worry, you don't have any income, no paperwork, you know, whatever, you know. How about your dog? Does he have a social? Social security number, that is, for those who don't know the U.S. system. But anyway, when there's too much money, there's perverted investment of that money, right? And that's what happens when you've printed money and when you've held interest rates at zero. So this is true in China, and I want to play for you a little bit about, well, the flip side of this whole equation. We've been kind of singing China's praises about the AIIB, but this is a little illustrative of what they do when they get involved with investments. Take a look at this. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it.
One remarkable piece of economic news barely rated a mention this week. China surpassed the United States as the world's leading manufacturer. It's hard to grasp the magnitude and speed of China's economic transformation. However, things may not be as rosy as they seem. It's estimated that 10
Can you guys hear that?
cities are being
No. Okay. I'm sorry. Well, I'll print this. It's okay, JP. That's all right. Take a look at this when you have a chance. Essentially, what this is illustrating is these Chinese ghost cities, right? If you look here, there's like whole apartment buildings and these streets. This is a whole, like 11 a.m. in this city. These places are just totally abandoned. Let me see if there's more images. That's 11 a.m. The city streets are just totally empty. Let's see if I've got a news story on this. Yeah, exploring the abandoned Chinese zombie ghost cities. Essentially, in order to keep their growth rate, they've had a over 10% growth rate for 10 years. and it has slowed to about 7% recently. And God forbid you only have 7% growth. We've only got I don't know 2 or 3% in the States, and that's been the case for a long, long time. But you know, you can show GDP numbers by building an office building. You know, you build an office building and you pay a bunch of workers to build it, and you buy a bunch of concrete, and that all shows up in GDP, right? So you can actually, if you've got enough money sitting around, you can kind of make things look a certain way for a certain amount of time. But again, with all of that free money, it perverts the investment incentive, right? And things like bridges to nowhere get built and zombie cities, and China has this problem. Arguably, if you create an Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, you can go to places like Myanmar or Indonesia, and you can build projects there, and you can ship out your concrete, or actually take advantage of the natural resources that exist in some of those emerging markets and bring them back to China for development. But in any case, these things are related, right? China has a lot of money to invest. They're trying to become a bigger player on the world stage, but you know, if they start doing things like this in other countries, it's just, you know, there's people starving and empty office buildings. Like, really, arguably, banks are supposed to match excess human energy with projects that will make humanity better. You know, if I was going to become a banker, that's what would be my reason for getting up in the morning. And because we've got all of these just totally whacked out metrics around the world, just strange things are happening, and well, it's just not good. What's next for China's central bank? Here's something interesting as well, and we've talked about this in the United States and in Japan, but this article is about what's the Chinese central bank going to do. They're going to start printing money, right? They're going to get into that every country around the world is doing. Why? Because they need to make their exports continue to be competitive around the world, right? So they're trying to introduce the renminbi as an alternate to the dollar in terms of a world reserve currency. And what are they doing to make Chinese exports competitive during that time? They're also printing money, right? So that's what this is. That's what this article is about. Check it out. It's a race to the bottom. It's a part of a currency war, and this is why. Well, we wanted to bring it full circle. This is why Bitcoin was born, right? It's because governments have been doing this going way back to ancient Rome, right? Where they collect all the coins and they dilute the gold in those coins and then read those coins out to circulation in order to fund this whim around war and things like that. That's what's happening now, and there's no reason to not expect it, given our observation of history, our ability to see what's happened in the past. And well, Bitcoin and things like it are just a really cool answer to this whole problem. You know, just like China, you know, backed in a corner, the only thing at their disposal was to opt out and create their own infrastructure bank. Well, Bitcoin is the ultimate opt out. I mean, it's for individuals who see all of this playground politics going on around the world, playing with money that affects all of us. You know, all of us earn money in some denomination or another. If you earn dollars, if you earn euro, if you earn rupiah, that money is not stable sitting in your pocket. It's manipulated by people you don't even know. You don't even know what the supply is. When you earn that money, you don't know what the guarantee is of what that will be worth down the road. In past meetings, I've shown an image of a single rupiah note, 1 rupiah, right? back from the 1950s. Somebody earned that rupiah note, and it's now worth like, I don't know, less than 1,000th of a cent or something like that. So it's basically worthless. This is what happens with all paper currency. And well, as this new global monetary system is being born, it's just really neat that Bitcoin exists, right? Because it allows individuals who, you know, watching all this going on, it's their opportunity to participate in one alternative to the status quo. The status quo is going to change. It's obvious. All of these major world powers are trying to define that new thing, and right.
So, I mean, I think the trend is towards decentralization, and that's exactly what Bitcoin does.
Yes.
A lot of other things.
Yes. Hallelujah. You know, thank God for Bitcoin. We can, you know, we can create a Bitcoin wallet, earn Bitcoin, and trade Bitcoin with one another without worrying about any of these people and what they're doing. And that's pretty darn cool.
And the Chinese people don't love their government any more than the Americans do.
Oh yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
I really need to learn more about China and the whole culture. I know that they, you know, from what I've read, just in general, they have periods of time where they're more centralized, and then they kind of decentralize, and then they're more centralized, and but they've had a lot more coherent history going way back, way before the United States came to be. You know?
China has millennial plans. They
Right.
plan for 1,000 years.
Yeah. So yes, they're not going to go quietly in the night, and they're more and more they're not paying attention of the fist pounding of the United States, and I think that's.
Plus, the fist pounding is really seems to be not much more than fist pounding, because the actual assets of gold and whatnot there are long gone anyway. So that's another thing.
Well, you know, we didn't really talk about that, but you know, Russia and China have been hoarding gold for quite some time now, and given the ambiguity of what will supersede the dollar, something will supersede the dollar as the world's reserve currency. We don't know what yet. Could be the SDR, could be gold again, or it could be a Chinese currency backed by gold. They're the largest net importer of gold. God knows how much they mine inside of China.
Well, and how much they still have from way back, you know,
Right.
about the Indonesian gold thing. And
Yeah, and if they were to say tomorrow, by the way, the renminbi is convertible to gold at this exchange rate going forward, you know, why wouldn't you hold that instead of U.S. dollars? Because gold, if it was truly convertible to gold, gold is the ultimate settlement currency, and it's the ultimate repudiation of the status quo, Bretton Woods, and the U.S. dollar. So, well, we shall see. In any case, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. We're right up against the hour. Thanks for listening. Like I mentioned, we have an ongoing conversation going on at the Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group. Please, when you find something interesting, post it there, and we'll talk about it when we get together in person every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Ubud. Thanks for coming. We'll see you same time next week.
Thanks.